Hi, I'm Jordan.
Hi, and I'm Doyle. And there's some things I got to say today. Specifically, I want to talk a little bit about some of the goings on in the United States stock market, or I don't know which one of the exchanges it is, but the GameStop, the AMC, and the like, those stocks that recently have been affected by actors in the stock market that have created demand and driven some of the prices way up. And specifically, and we're not going to go into, I don't want to go into discussing about the actors themselves. That's not, I think, the point on my mind right now. But, specifically, the group that is kind of in focus is the subreddit of Wall Street Bets and some of the actions and activities that they've taken that appear to have affected several of these stocks. But what I wanted to talk about was, first of all, GameStop. And it's a company that's been around a while. If you've been to any of the malls over the years, you've probably seen a GameStop. They've had a lot of presence in local malls where people would in games and trade games and things of that sort. They had a pretty nice thing there. But
not just that, they've been around much longer than that. GameStop is actually the consolidation of EBX, Electronics Boutique, Funko-Land, and Software, etc. And maybe one or two more. Yeah. So that's back into like the early 90s, if not into maybe even the late 80s.
So they've been around for a good while, and they've had a pretty good footprint, but it is pretty well known that they've not kept up with the transition to digital like a lot of other companies have in the gaming space. And their stock has been affected by it, right? Because they're not keeping up in the technologies, and so they've had downward pressure on their stock. But I think that there's a point to talk about, and that's that downward pressure has been maybe increased or exacerbated by institutions and wealthy individuals that have been doing short trades, right? Betting that the stock's going to go down. And obviously, with enough downward pressure, other people looking at that, they'll see that, and that will have a community effect on the stock, because people will go, oh, if these people are betting against it, I'm not going to bet on it, kind of a thing. So it reduces demand, which we know in basic economics, you remove demand, and which is the demand for it, and then the price will go down.
As long as the supply remains the same.
Right. And it does, right? Stock in a company is a fixed entity.
Well, usually, splits, et cetera, but for the most part, you can treat it as.
Yeah. And then what we have seen in the last week or two has been some actors kind of seeing that and deciding to put an upward pressure, right? Or at least that's an inference, I think, and it's a fair one, about some of the expected rationale behind or outcome of what they're doing. And they've driven the price up by creating demand. And again, the whole idea of supply being somewhat fixed, or rather fixed with the stock shares of a company that obviously isn't splitting at this point. And they've blown up the stock really, really high, a couple 100% or more. And a lot of people are getting all up in arms that people are manipulating the market. Well, to be succinct with my point, it's just a counter manipulation to the downward manipulation by people selling it short, which is the same thing, right? They are basically artificially negatively affecting demand. And as we said a moment ago, with the supply remaining the same, then the price is going down, which benefits these hedge funds or institutions or wealthy individuals that have been selling or have been buying short contracts on GameStop and AMC and these others. Whereas these other actors are creating this artificial demand raising the price by
let's be careful. It's not artificial demand.
True.
They're putting money on the table. Right. That's real demand.
That is right. It's not artificial demand. It is
unexpected
real
demand. It is unexpected demand motivated by non-traditional motivations.
And it's creating the outcome that one would expect in a balanced economic situation, right? That you have increased demand, I think the thing to be of note is, if I were a standard shareholder of GameStop, when the stock was trading in the 40s or whatever the trend was prior to all of this, and someone offered me 3 times that, $120 for my shares, I certainly would be tempted to sell.
Well, I mean, especially if you actually know things about a GameStop's operation, like you'd mentioned at the beginning. Like if you understand that, there may not be long for this world. This is a real good opportunity for me to cash out, and at the same time providing a good effectively to somebody who wants it, right? The stock, you want the stock, take it. I'll take my money. We're both happy. We're all happy. What's wrong in this transaction? Nothing.
That's free enterprise at its best, right? Free enterprise, and that's the whole idea behind basic free enterprise and capitalism is that we make business arrangements with one another that we believe benefit each other, and we make that transaction happen. Yep. So I struggle with how people are rationalizing in their head that there's something abnormal about this behavior,
right?
Except for the fact that it is counter to the historical way that the pressure of shorts and things, and even upward demand, but positive demand to acquire the stock, not to depress the price.
I think I would say that it is abnormal because you don't see this sort of large scale action coming from the term retail investors, right? So that's usually individuals who have small investment accounts relative to like a hedge fund, relative to very, very wealthy individuals. When I say very wealthy, I mean, hundreds of millionaires to billionaires level.
So the volume is abnormal, right? But not the actual behavior. Right, people buy stocks
on an individual level. It is not unexpected, but it's unexpected. It's abnormal in the sense that taking a traditionally rational approach at deciding. When I say rational, I mean rational based on the traditional metrics on deciding what stock to buy, what stock to sell. It is abnormal that even an individual would buy GameStop at $100 whatever dollars.
Right. Looking at the fundamentals, looking at the earnings history, looking at the projections for the future trends for the future, things of that sort. Correct. Right. The standard way that people do value investing versus sort of a risk investing.
But one of the things I want to pick up here, unless you had something you want to continue with before.
No, that's fine. I talked a long time to make my little succinct point that it's difficult for me about the people that have an issue with it.
I think that this is a good place to kind of. I want to kind of give my perspective on this, but I think that my perspective is based on, clearly subjective point of view, but I try to take as an objective view of things as I can. Not that I'm an objectivist by any stretch, because I think that has a lot of pitfalls, taking that kind of holistic objectivist view. But I think that we can serve ourselves very well by shifting to more of an objective view, usually when it comes to these kinds of things. So going back to talking about it's abnormal, it is abnormal, but it's not abnormal in a way that would cause anybody to really be concerned, right? Because it could be that if 10 or maybe even 100 people did such purchases for GameStop stock, at a much higher than what the going rate had been, or higher enough to, over time bring it up a little bit, nobody would have really thought much about that, and maybe that would have been some maybe insider trading, because that goes on all the time. It could be somebody who has a relative high up in GameStop, know that they're about to do something revolutionary and really try to give it one last go, or when I say one last go, one big go at trying to right the ship or change their direction. And giving that information to somebody else is like, oh man, yeah, I'm going to go buy it because I want to get in now because I believe that this is going to happen. So that could be happening. That happens every day with all kinds of companies. As illegal as some of that is, it still happens. So nobody would bat an eye about that. Even if it were a stock that wasn't as downwardly trending as GameStop, so like something that's like kind of middle of the road thing. I can't think of a really good example because all the examples come to mind are either way up or way down. But something that's like a stable industry, maybe medical, right? Some medical things are somewhat stable. Some are a little more volatile, but I think something like that, and if you saw this kind of action against that kind of a stock, you would see almost no reaction. Like even at this level, this many people driving that kind of stock up. Now, would there be feelers gone up by the SEC to look into it? Maybe, because I mean that's a pretty big swing in a short time. So there may be some investigation there. But it's unlikely that there would be any recourse against any individual in that case, because how could there be, right? You're talking about somebody investing $1,000 in this company. Okay. Somebody investing $5,000 in this company. Okay. That's not the level of investment that SEC moves on. SEC moves on an individual dropping $100,000 into a failing stock, $100,000 into a stock that may not even, where $100,000 buys a whole lot of the stock, So like moves to like literally take over a market or to unduly influence the market from a single point. That's the kind of stuff that SEC usually goes after. So it nobody would have blinked really if this kind of, more or less, if this kind of action had gone against a middle of the road stock. The only reason that this has garnered this kind of reaction is because you have these hedge funds. It's not just hedge funds. Everybody keeps saying hedge funds because it's shorthand, and I understand that. But it's not just hedge funds. We need to be very clear about that. It's also large investors. When I say large investors, somebody who has a 10,000 stock portfolio, and not just stocks, but stocks and short contracts and puts and all of this kind of stuff that they have in place. And somebody who is at like high ratioing, like where they're trying to really turn over a lot of profit short term because of the volume of capital that they have in the market. Those kinds of people, which there's nothing wrong with doing that. I want to be very clear that I have nothing against very wealthy individuals. I have nothing against organizations operating together in the market in that way. That's part of the free market that I think is just fine. What's not just fine is when you go into those markets with that level of money and you know what you're risking when you go and do it because you're savvy about it, right? You're not playing that kind of game unless you're savvy about it. And so you go into it knowing what you're risking, and then something occurs that makes you have to pay down on that risk. So meaning that you have the loss, you have to take it on the chin, the loss. And then what you do is you start pulling strings to get things to change so that you don't take your loss. That's what happened here that's wrong, in my opinion, right? You want to talk about people colluding before the fact to bring down GameStop. As much as I think that's very unethical and I think that is a bad thing to be doing, whatever. I'm not here to criticize that on any other terms than I think that it's a bad reason. And I want to talk about some of those reasons why I think that's bad in a moment. But whatever, you're doing that's fine. That's the way the market works. It happens every day and has for, decades, if not since the advent of the market, or the advent of shorting at least. That's fine. But you can't also do that and then also complain when somebody squeezes you the other way, right? You just can't. You can't. That's the game you're playing. You don't get to change the rules when you lose the game. That's what we're trying to see here.
There's two pieces to that action that I think are important to make a clear distinction. And I think you mentioned them separately, but I want to call them out a little bit more clearly. And that is the individuals and the organizations or the funds or whatever that are shorting the stocks. That's one action, right? Because they're taking a risk based on what they believe or understand the trend is on that particular company.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the part that you said is quite fine. And I agree, it's quite fine. The second thing is then they're trying to create the pressure to make sure that happens.
Yes.
Right. They're taking the risk, quote unquote, making the bet, and then they're trying to control the odds of that bet.
Yeah.
Whereas the parties on the other side are purchasing a product. Their motives may be clandestine or maybe underhanded. They may have a motive that is beyond typical standard free market transactions, and that's their
those
motive.
Aren't tantamount to the same thing, though. Having underhanded or unscrupulous, let's just say, tactics is not tantamount to trying to put pressure on the market for a certain commodity or stock.
No, and I wasn't trying to equate that. But I was trying to say is I was kind of excluding their motive for why they were buying the stock.
Yeah, the
right?
motive is kind of irrelevant, to be honest, when it comes to the market.
That's right. Because with anyone, it typically, with money, it's always more money. It's always to make money.
Sure.
Right. And the actors on the acquisition side, if you think about it, they are taking a significant risk because they're buying a stock that the fundamentals typically would not support, but they're creating that demand. And so they're the ones that are at risk, right? If they're missing their bet, the value of their asset just evaporates. And they're trying to manipulate it too, trying to control and risk, their odds by getting, influencing others to do the same thing. But that's standard. There's if it continues to go up.
What do you think a quarterly report is?
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly right. It's trying to protect, either control or protect or manage the ebb and flow of it, whatever it may be, because stocks have that. So the point I was getting at is that there are two distinct pieces, and I think to see that aspects to it, the actual buying of the short and the actual buying of the stock, and then the intentional downward pressure to protect the risk or to mitigate the risk, versus on the other side, what that does is that hurts the company. That doesn't hurt any of the actors. It hurts the company, right? Whereas on the other side, the pressure to continue to push that stock up doesn't hurt the company at all.
Right.
Doesn't negatively affect the company at all.
Right.
It actually has a potential effect of helping the actors, the buyers and the sellers to some great extent, right? Because there is no win-lose. It's that pressure is a win-win.
It's what it is. It's a market boom.
It is.
Yeah.
Right, and rising tide rises all boats in that scenario.
Right.
So you look at it from that perspective, and that's where I think it opens and puts a lens on the actors that, to me, paints a whole different picture than what I think we're hearing out in the mainstream. Sure. And I won't even say mainstream media, but out in the mainstream, right? Sure. Because it is atypical. It is atypical. And but quite frankly, it kind of makes me chuckle a little bit.
Well, yeah. Here's the reason why I think that this is I'm going to put on my opinion hat here, and I try not to do this too much. But and this is a deep opinion, and you feel free to disagree if you want to, and we can have a discussion about it. That's why I think that this action by all of these individuals is very laudable, because the intention, I think, it's certainly not every individual, but I think for the most part, the intention of these individuals is not to make money on the investment. I think the intention is to attack what they see as negative behavior from these people who have all these short contracts. And we know this is the case because if you look at the reason why that was even picked, GameStop was picked as a stock, or AMC or any of these, it's because they were being heavily shorted, which is not surprising for a company that appears to be trending downward. Not surprising at all. Mm-hmm. But they were shorted beyond all of the stock that company actually has. When they first focused on it, I think GameStop was shorted at like 149%, meaning that there are short contracts on 149% of all of the stock that exists for GameStop, meaning that some of that stock's double contracted, which is gotta be. I can't see any way to interpret that other than to say that it's underhanded. Like, I just cannot see any way, because you can't do that. Like, you literally can't say, I'm going to sell this to you twice, right? I mean, you can say that, but it's like, that's not how a market works.
Right.
And so not only that, the amount being shorted was trending upward, and I think it peaked at somewhere like the last that I saw was somewhere like 290%. It's like, that's ridiculous. So you're saying like 3 times the stock of this company has, you're shorting it. At that point, anytime it goes over 100%, you're trying to kill a company. That's just all there is to it. You're trying to short it into the ground. And that's clear was what was happening here with these investors who were shorting GameStop. And so this is a group of people who see that happening, understand that's the reality of what's going on there, and people can spin it and sugarcoat it with words and this, that, and the other to make it sound like that's not what's going on. I'm sorry, you're lying if you're trying to make it sound like anything other than these investors were trying to kill GameStop, because that's what was going on there.
Sure, that was the second piece. They were trying to influence the odds on the risk that they had already taken. Absolutely. Or actually, not just influence it, predicted. In fact,
correct. And I think what you're seeing from these individual actors is, and the reason, and I know this because I haven't been a subscriber to the Wall Street Bets subreddit, but I have been there, and I've talked to you about this earlier. I've been there, many times over the years because I think it's funny. I think it's funny to see people mess around with expectations of other people. And you can say that that's good or bad or otherwise. That's just a personal quirk of mine. And so just to see the stocks that they talk about often is just pretty funny to me. But to see why they talk about certain stocks is also of interest. And so I understand that very often on that subreddit, I won't say very often, from time to time, that's a better way to put it. From time to time on that subreddit, there is a good rational basis and objective for the stocks that they pick. And it's not the reason why it amuses me is because that basis is basically never aligned with the reason why anybody ever buys stock. It's always some other motive. And the motive here is very clearly to punish these people who are over-shorting these stocks. As they should be, because that's the risk they're taking, right? And you can't argue that what the shorting is doing is not artificial, and then argue that what these individuals are doing is artificial. It's the same thing, right? Either one's okay or they're neither okay. Or either they're both okay or they're neither okay.
Right.
And that's the problem that we're seeing with corporate media and in the mainstream, as you said, additionally, to a great extent, that you're seeing a lot of apologists come out. You're seeing a lot of attacks come out that what these individuals, the actions that they've taken is unscrupulous, is bad, is illegal, is manipulation, when it's no different than what has already transpired. And so it's become very apparent, and not to get too, picking sides on this, but it's become very apparent that those who have the resources to pull the string and influence things like corporate media, etc., are the ones who are behind all of this kind of basically slandering of the individuals who are taking this action to try to put pressure on the hedge funds, wealthy individuals, all the people who have short contracts on these stocks.
When you think in terms of, and I get it, people are thinking about the motives behind these individual participants in this situation. That they're saying they're trying to manipulate and hurt other people, and maybe they are. But when you short a contract, you're basically not just trying to, you are actually hurting other people, because at some point in time, someone has to lose money on that stock to fulfill your contract.
If you're going to engage in that sort of characterization of anything with regards to the market, then you have to be very careful with what you're talking about with regards to the market. And you have to be, if you want to try to become speak ethically or morally even with regards to that, you got to be aware of everything that goes on, because shorts aren't the only thing in the market that are like this, right?
Sure.
I mean, you go back to like 2008 and the subprime mortgage crisis, like that kind of a loan period is like, that's even worse than shorting, right? Because shorting, at least, I mean, there's some utility there, especially if here's the
someone needs to get out and cut their losses.
Well, I'll take a quick aside and just say what I think the utility in shorting is. That's one, but even more important to that, it's a quicker signal to a company to right things, to make things better. They're like, hey, you're starting to get shorted more. You need to make things right now, right? You're almost too late when people start really seriously shorting your stock.
If it is driven by fundamentals, right?
Correct.
Versus manipulation trying to make it happen because of someone's perspective and point of view,
right?
Which is a subtle difference, but I'm with you. The the one thing I was going to go back and kind of wrap up in my thought process a moment ago is that the motives for the people, that only matters if the behavior is improper, unethical, or illegal.
Right.
If you think about it.
That's the only time we talk about it in society, right? And we talk about like in a court, right? That's the only time we start talking about it.
That's exactly where I was going. Mens rea. It only why you did something only matters if what you did was wrong.
Yep.
And buying a stock is not wrong.
Right.
There are rules that are in place to protect people that have inside information so that they don't do something that others don't have an equal opportunity. But everybody in this situation, everybody has an equal opportunity to buy this stock. Right? Everybody has equal. It's not like it's a closed. It's
but that's the whole thing. It's like all this action was taken based on that opportunity too. That like like to the degree that you can invest, you can invest.
And it's real easy to conclude that these people, if at worst, used the rules of the game against some other players, at worst, and at best, they just allowed free enterprise to happen. And the outcomes of free enterprise, in this particular case, is more people, more individuals benefited than others that didn't. Now, it may have been a greater scale for these others, right? The individual, wealthy individual investors, or the hedge funds, or the other.
But technically,
big entities.
Technically, it's the same scale because it slides, right? As much as these people, like in total, in sum, if you want to
in
total,
total, it's a zero. Well, with shorts, it's not always a zero sum game, but
it's definitely not zero sum game. And this is the crux of why I think that this is such a wonderful thing that it's happening, is because they're getting punished more severely than these people are winning because they took the risk of shorting 1.5 to 3 times as much of the stock out. And they knew that. It's not like they didn't know that. It's not like they were frauded into it, right? They knew what they were doing when they did it. And so I have no sympathy, zero sympathy for people on that side of the equation.
Well, that's where I was heading. I wasn't going to be as explicit in the language, but that's what I was driving at. It's and maybe there's some ignorance on my part. I'm sure there is, but I don't see that this action, the recent action, I don't see, outside of the fact that people that didn't expect to get impacted have been, or actors that didn't expect to get impacted got impacted, and I don't see where anyone has any rationale that supports, hey, these actors did something wrong, illegal, against the rules of the game,
right?
And anyway. That's sort of where my head was. Once as I began to peel back some of the information and the layers of the onion to get a clearer picture of what was going on and who are the actors and who are the loudest voices and who are the greatest critics. You don't really see a lot of people coming out in support of this. They are not getting the stump as frequently.
That's the thing. Well, I mean, that's because it's the corporate media is controlled, right? I mean, that's the whole point. Part of my point with all this. But I was going to say, you haven't seen anybody coming out. You didn't see the tweets from Elon Musk?
Oh yeah. But I'm just talking about
richest man in the world.
Sure. I'm just saying that there's it's not an equal amount of volume or voices permitted on the other side through the
amplified voices amplified, maybe we say.
Yeah, great way to put it. Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, anyway. And we shouldn't expect that. But that's kind of the point I started with to a degree, is that those who when people who have the ability to influence the public narrative are impacted by the actions of individuals, that's when you see the truth come to light. When things like the corporate media, etc., are lambasting individuals and not these organizations or people who are being held to account, quite literally held to account by the individuals. And this is so problematic. The thing is, I just hope people can understand and not just take what they're being spoon-fed by the corporate media. How important it is. That's why I said this should be a watershed moment where so many people wake up and realize that everything is rigged, and okay, you just have to realize that everything's rigged so that you can unplug from that before we can start enacting a lot of solutions to try to unrig these systems. But that's going to be difficult. And a lot of people, just one more thing and I'll let you talk. One of my concerns is that a lot of people pin the problems here on the wrong thing because they have very simplistic thinking. And because I can't tell you how many tweets I've seen about, see, this is what you get with capitalism. This is like capitalism always leads here. And it's like, you really don't know anything about what you're talking about. And one, because the way you phrase these things it's such an emotional thing that it's clear you're not thinking about this. You're just like letting your heart out, which I understand. I do that from time to time too. But that's not going to solve your issue. Is more regulation the answer here? Of course it's not. Of course it's not the answer here. It's how would it work?
Let's expound on that. This is what you get with capitalism. I would say absolutely. The unscrupulous actors are pointed out. Because these actors over here can take scrupulous actors. Is that a word? Scrupulous is a word. Then the unscrupulous actors get called out.
Yep.
And what I chuckled about a few minutes ago when you were chatting was a vision I had in my head when you were talking about some of these actors, and then you went on to say that it's real kind of immature or fundamental. I can't remember exactly what term you used, but the vision I had in my head is a kid that all of a sudden something happened to them. They go, "That's not fair." Right? I mean, they put their hands on their hip and said, "That's not fair because this happened to me." Well, no, this is what you've been doing to everyone else. Now it just turned around and happened to you.
Well, that's like I was saying earlier, like trying to change the rules of the game when you're losing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I quite frankly, I think this has, to your, I hope it's a watershed moment. It has a potential to be a very radical, eye-opening situation.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned too about this is something that just screams in my ears. Everybody needs to think for themselves. They need to go find the information out themselves. They need to understand it. If they don't understand it, they need to go dig some more. They need to go find more and more and more so that they can get to the truth. Something we've talked about before. The truth is absolute. It isn't an opinion. It isn't your truth and my truth. The truth is absolute, which means that if we have disagreements, people have disagreements on what's actually transpired, one or both of us don't have all the information yet to get to the real truth, the fundamental truth.
Right.
And that's a process. That's not necessarily an event. That's a process. And I think people they owe it to themselves to do that, and not take everything at face value, not take somebody's word just because they have respect for them. There's a lot of people that I have respect for in this world, a lot of people that I disagree that I have with on lots of fundamental things that I have great respect for. I don't take everything that's said at face value. There are a lot of people that I totally agree with on most everything in fundamentals that I still want to make sure. How do you know that? Where did you get that information? Who is the they that you quoted?
Right.
Because I want to know who they are. I want to know who I'm embracing. I want to know every morning when I wake up, who is it that I have aligned my beliefs with?
Yep.
Where my information came from, and I want that for everyone too. Because I think that then creates the removal of all of this smoke screen, all of these filters that we see, whether they're intentional or unintentional, that exist. Like 2 weeks ago, a lot of people probably didn't know what shorting a stock was.
Yeah.
I think a lot more people probably have more clear understanding now.
Yeah.
Now they have the opportunity to understand, well, why do people do that?
Right.
Why does it even make sense to bet against a company? There are a lot of good reasons, as you alluded to some of them earlier. But there's a point in time when it becomes, I'm not just understanding the trends. I'm not just understanding the fundamentals and saying, hey, the good money says this company is not going to be around. That's one thing. But then to say, the good money says this company is not going to be around, and I'm going to show it. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to prove it to you. and accelerate that downward force, which is not what free enterprise is supposed to be about,
and that's
right?
but that's the thing though, is like at some point, and I don't. This maybe bears a separate conversation because I don't know that. Let me just say what I'm going to say. At some point, that is causing the demise of a company, right? And it's
Sure.
I think it's too fine of a line to understand where that is, and I think that because it's too fine of a line to understand where that is, we have to act like that line isn't there. I think that restricting the freedom of somebody to use their capital in that way is not the answer. I think the answer is exactly what we're seeing right now. Hold those people to account through the same markets that they're using. But I think that it's tough to say that because there's a lot of people's livelihoods that are on the line, right? And then you can open up things like an Amazon literally sending everybody else out of business directly through just the stock market. But I think that's a risk that needs to be there, and that goes to, and this definitely needs to be another thing that we need to talk about. One of my fundamental beliefs is that I think that corporation is a very government based sort of thing, right? Because the government is what grants corporations. So I will say organizations, businesses. I think businesses need to remain private. I think that making them public is a dangerous step for the integrity of a business. I think making them public is a dangerous step for the operation of the business vis-a-vis what we're seeing here with like shorting it into the ground. Because I think all those risks need to be there if you're going to take your company public. But I think that we need to make a company being public much less of a desirable state for a company. I really think that needs to happen, and I think these are the kinds of things that kind of can force that issue.
Sure. Well,
and there's a lot of reasons I think that, and this isn't the place to talk about that. But like I said, maybe we should have another conversation about it.
I think that is a great topic for a future discussion, because there's a lot of there, if you will, on how we got there. I mean, how we got to the point that companies become public, and what are some of the things there that are intended to safeguard some of the manipulations. But as we all know, no matter what kind of safeguards that are put in place, people will find ways to skirt around them just sufficiently to stay within the bounds of what's expected. In some cases, go over the bounds, but and that's what I think we're seeing here is some of the possibility that people are skirting, the bounds, because they are. But I mean, then the possibility of going over, like what you're saying, how can you short more stock than what exists for the company to begin with?
Well, it's because somebody's willing to take that contract, and that's the
for sure.
So I mean, you're not going to ever stop that, but I mean, you can still call that out as underhanded, because it is underhanded.
Right. One thing I was going to add about you mentioned about the downward pressure that these organizations create. The counter to that, on a less directly manipulative scenario, are things like Tesla, right? That there's a lot of hype, and I say that not in a negative way. I don't mean a negative hype, but a lot of hype about the possibilities of what a lot of things that Tesla is doing, and their stock went through the roof, and I mean to the point in time where they're the largest capitalized company in the world, or Musk was the richest person.
He's the richest man, but
I think Apple may still be the biggest, but or whatever, whichever one it is. I don't know. It's a game they play, and I don't know.
It's probably Apple, because like Apple's getting close to like $1 trillion.
Yeah. But the point being is, before they were ever turned a profit, right?
Yeah.
And it was all on potential, but it was an up potential, right? And it's a case where the actors were using the phrase "eyes wide open," when they buy into the Tesla stock to do that, knowing that there's a risk, and that risk is it could go to zero.
Right.
I mean, or it could go broke. And I mean, but it's a mitigated risk, right? Because you're betting on history of this individual who's got a pretty good track record, I would say, financially and successfully wise. I'm not talking about him as a person, a human being. I don't know him, but as the trail of financial success that he has left is pretty impressive. And I guess you've got to have. You got to permit, to your point earlier, that we can't really stop the shorting or the downside pressures because of the upside pressures is there. They sort of have to live in concert with one another to some extent.
Because here's the thing: this is the big problem with regulation generally. When we're talking about like the SEC and whatnot, is that regulation functionally now on the books and the stated intention is not this, but this is functionally what has always happened. Let's just speak specifically SEC. The regulation with the SEC is to hide the underhanded actions and to punish the things that hold those underhanded actions to account. That has always been the track record of what's happened in effect, more or less, with the SEC. And I think more broadly with when it comes to government regulation generally. And the reason that is the same in every area of the government is that you have cronyism, you have collusion with certain actors in those markets, whether that be the actual stock market, whether that be healthcare, whether that be wherever it is, with the government to lobby the government to pass laws that they either get excluded from and their competition doesn't, or laws that they write in such a way that they're already meeting that standard and they know that their competition can't. And like I said, that goes with the SEC as well. So the reason why you don't see as much of this kind of coordinated action as we have with the GameStop stuff against those entrenched, let's say, power interests or entrenched money interests is because functionally things like the SEC, other regulatory agencies and entities are acting as a shield, not just a shield to stop the action from happening against them, but a shield from understanding how action can't even be taken against them. And so what you're getting now, and this is very interesting, I think, phenomenon, is that you're getting levels of savvy and wealth in the common folk, because capitalism is rising all boats, as we keep talking about a lot. You're getting the level of savvy and wealth in the common folk that they understand that they're understanding the game divorced of the idea of these regulatory entities, because you just see the facts of everything that's going on and are understanding. They're bright enough to deduce what's going on and are also bright enough to deduce how to combat that. So in essence, what we're seeing here is that this is the beginning of a sort of war against that class, the entrenched power and money structure.
Is this another example of the classic social phenomenon of the have-nots rise up against the haves?
It definitely is. I think, and this is the thing that makes me hopeful around all of this, is that hopefully it won't come to, a bloody conflict in any sort of way. And I don't think that that's the track we're on right now. I think that there are some people who want that, right? I think there on many sides of the split, let's say, I think there are people who want that. But I think that there are a lot more people who don't want that. And a lot of those people who don't want that are, again, very intelligent, becoming more and more wealthy by the day, becoming more and more savvy and understanding of things by the day, and are more innovative. That's the thing that I think that people don't understand, is that entrenched structures, by the nature of their size, their scope, and their kind of necessary sloth, let's say, are not very innovative. And so they have a huge vulnerability to people who can move much faster, organizations that can move much faster, and who are much more innovative. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is that those individuals are becoming more savvy and innovative with their tactics on how they're trying to address the inequity of control of their own life. And that's really what I think it comes down to. It's not about them trying to seize power for themselves. I think it's about them trying to, and I don't really like this term, but I'm going to use it, level the playing field.
Right. Yeah, interesting. I do think that it is just a different incantation or a different instantiation of the have-nots, right? Because I mean, we've talked in the past. My background, my original education was criminal justice and sociology, and more sociology actually, even though I was a CJ major. And one of the things that I latched onto is the behavior, the historical behavior of groups in society,
Yeah.
and it's from all through recorded history. This has been the case. The cycle of the the haves, and it sort of fits in the mold of power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we see that over time that does happen, right? That individuals and small groups get such power that and then they enlarge their peasantdom, if you will. That then
Serfdom's
that
the term.
Yes, thank you. The strength of that of in numbers creates enough
I guess actually it's
counterpower.
fiefdom. I'm sorry.
Fiefdom.
I think it's fiefdom, isn't it?
Whichever is the appropriate.
Yeah.
Not trying to be disrespectful of any culture, but using the
No. It's
incorrect
just
term.
my mind. Just,
I mean,
I'm sorry.
serfdom obviously tends toward more the Indian culture in current history, and fiefdom is that's more in the Western European.
Yeah.
In any event, I don't know what in Eastern Europe or Asia the concept is, but that whole concept, right? And so I think we're seeing that it's the definitions are slightly different, but I think the concentration of power and influence and the dispersion of power and influence, are probably better currency for understanding power now, and we're starting to see that, and it's I'll stop because I started to say my wish is, and I don't want to get my wish out there because I'm a believer wishes get out there, they don't come true. Just kidding. The thought is that there's there are perceived outcomes depending on how something may turn out, and they very likely will be incorrect. But as this occurs, to your point, I hope that it doesn't lead to bloodshed and violence. That's not what I expect at all. I would like to see it become more of a humane, transitional kind of part of the circumstances that we find in society, and it's not limited to the United States. I don't think.
Right.
I think there's other parts of the world that are facing similar kinds of struggles with cultural circumstances, if for lack of a better
this certainly bears another discussion. But I mean, to your point, even that there were stocks that experienced the same thing over in the UK as well, and had similar circumstances with the trading applications shut down there too, the same as they did here. And so there, it's not a phenomenon of the United States for sure. It is not limited to there, not localized there. And I think you're right about the aspects you're speaking about. I think that, to me, the ultimate aim of all of this needs to be more decentralization, and that is the only way that anybody, I think, in any of all of this is going to feel like their voice matters more, that their opinion is respected more, that they have the dignity of being an individual, right? And I won't say let's be honest, but I'll say what I think about this is that I feel that a lot of our systems of society now completely dehumanize the individual, completely de-individualize the individual even. I mean, we know this, we talk about a lot about like collectivism and about how much everything's about, identity politics and collectivist politics, and the idea that, we got to work for the greater good more than we do for the individual. It's like, no. I mean, we need to take care of the people around us and our communities and stuff for sure, but that doesn't start with the collective. You start with the collective, you're going to end with nothing. You have to start with the individual.
Right. That's what that's the foundational. That's the foundational of the collective is the individual existence and actualization, to use Maslow's self-actualization.
And you have to, give people their ability to live the life they want to live. Because if you don't, then you're going to just breed resentment. And that's what we're seeing here. That's what the whole thing with this past election was resentment of people who want to live their life the way that they want to live it versus people who want them to live the life that they want them to live. And it's not just respect my life. It's not that at all. It's like, no, you're going to change to be like this. And it's like, people aren't going to abide that for very long. That's what I think that a lot of these entrenched power structures don't understand is, and people in those power structures don't understand is that individuals want to be individual, and you cannot kill human nature in that way.
So it's amazing how GameStop stock actually is such a strong component of all the stuff we're talking about, but it is, right? Because I think it's a great example of the circumstances and the situations that lead to this type of action and this type of change, this type of progress, if you will.
I think you're right. Well, and just to further I guess complete the clarification of my perspective on all this, that this whole GameStop, et cetera, all these other stocks, that whole situation, it's a proxy war, is what it is.
Absolutely. Yep.
And right. It's a proxy war where the people who, at least in the first volley here, the people who are most injured, and they're not injured, but we'll just say quote unquote injured, are the ones who deserve to be, because they took the risk and they're just reaping the reward of the risk that they took, just not in the side that they want. The problem is they're trying to counter manipulate, whatever. Well, this is not going to be the end of these sorts of things. We're going to see a lot more of this in this year and in next year, I think.
So this sounds like a really good spot to pause until our next discussion. We left several danglers here for us to pick up later and to go deeper on. And I look forward to that. I think this was one of the more energetic discussions we've had in a while, because I think you and I both have very strong points of view, quite aligned too, but very strong points of view about this, and for very positive reasons.
Sure,
right?
I mean, it's very clear in my mind, because this is a manifestation of a physical manifestation of something that I've known has been going on in our society for a long time, and something that needs to resolve itself. In one way or another, it's going to have to resolve itself. And again, this was not bloody. This was not tragic for anybody who didn't understand that they were undertaking potentially tragic endeavors. It wasn't a surprise to anybody. I mean, it was a surprise to some people, but it should not have been a surprise in the way that they took it as a surprise. Meaning, this is what they signed up for when they signed that contract. And so this is ideal in my mind way to approach the problems that we have in our society currently. Agreed.
All are voluntary actors in this situation.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Well, all right, sir. As always, it was fun and a pleasure.
Yes.
And so we'll part now for the duration till the next time we come together for a conversation.
All right, Doyle. Good times. Appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye now.
All right. See ya.